I made a mistake on a car deal, and I gotta find one quick. I mean, this really sucks.
A forgotten Corvette, hidden for decades, reemerges from the shadows of Texas. Thomas Weeks' discovery isn't just metal, it's memory, legacy, and one of the greatest barn finds in muscle car history. Stay tuned as we uncover this classic car. The man behind the fine Thomas Weeks. In the world of classic car restoration, a few names stand out not just for what they build, but for what they revive. Thomas Weeks is one of those names. If slightly familiar with Misfit Garage, the Discovery Channel spin-off from Fast and Loud, then it is possible to have seen his face, maybe under a welder's mask, covered in grease, or peering under the hood of some long-neglected muscle car. But beyond television, Weeks has carved out a real-life legacy as a relentless seeker of American automotive treasure. Thomas Weeks isn't just a car builder, he's a storyteller with socket wrenches for pens and engine blocks for paper. His canvas is vintage steel, and his motivation is rooted in nostalgia, performance, and an eye for machines that were once loved and later forgotten. For Weeks, every car he touches carries its own ghost story, and he sees himself not as a mechanic, but as a kind of restorer of memory. Born and raised in Texas, Thomas was drawn to the roar of engines and the sparkle of chrome from an early age. He began working in auto shops long before most teenagers get a driver's license. By the time he joined the cast of Misfit Garage, he already had decades of hands-on experience, not just fixing cars, but bringing them back from the brink of extinction. His no-nonsense attitude and passionate eye for detail quickly made him a standout figure among car enthusiasts. What set him apart wasn't just what he built, it was what he found. Thomas became known for digging deep into the American heartland and unearthing vehicles that time had buried. Rusted frames buried under hay bales, faded dashboards hidden behind barn doors, engines long silent, but still breathing potential. His most remarkable finds weren't always the flashiest cars, they were the stories. And that's what made his discovery of a 1967 Corvette Stingray so special. This wasn't just any classic car. This was the car, a C2 Corvette convertible from the final year of the Stingray design, arguably the most coveted generation of Corvettes ever built. It was sitting in silence, hidden from the world for decades, and Thomas was the one who opened the door. To understand how significant that is, you have to understand how Weeks operates. He doesn't just stumble onto cars, he hunts them. His eyes are always scanning barns, garages, backyards, looking for signs. A cracked garage door, dusty tire tracks, rumors from locals. Sometimes it takes years of asking around, knocking on doors, or waiting for an estate to finally open its gates. He's not in it just for resale value or fame. When he finds a car, especially one untouched for decades, he sees a life frozen in time. He respects the original owner, the history, and the decisions that led to a once glorious machine being stored and forgotten. Then, piece by piece, he resurrects it. That's why when word spread that Thomas Weeks had uncovered a fully original 1967 Corvette in a barn across from South Fork Ranch, the classic car world took notice. This wasn't a setup for a television drama. It was a genuine moment of discovery. A moment that proved barn finds are still out there, and that some of the best stories are still waiting to be told. When it comes to American automotive history, few vehicles are as revered or as instantly recognizable as the 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. The Lost Corvette. It was the final year of the second-generation Corvette, known as the C2, and many collectors consider it the peak of the Stingray legacy. The 67 model was a machine of aggressive beauty, raw power, and engineering finesse. It was the kind of car that wasn't just driven, it was worshipped. And Thomas Weeks had just found one sitting still in the dark for over 20 years. The car in question was a 1967 Corvette Stingray convertible, a model that, when new, could be optioned with a monstrous 427 cubic inch V8 engine, putting out up to 435 horsepower. That made it not only a symbol of American muscle, but a threat to European competitors on road and track alike. Its design was sleek, muscular, and unmistakably bold, with a long nose, short rear deck, and signature hidden headlights. The 67 also introduced fender vents, 5-slot rally wheels, and the iconic Stinger hood if ordered with the big block. It wasn't just the end of an era, it was the year they got everything right. Now imagine finding one of those in nearly untouched condition. That's what made Thomas Weeks' discovery so remarkable. The Corvette he found had reportedly been sitting since 1984, stored away in a barn near South Fork Ranch, the same South Fork Ranch made famous in the TV series Dallas. Covered in dust and quietly waiting, the car hadn't seen sunlight in decades. But what made this find truly jaw-dropping was how complete and original it was. It had just 26,648 miles on the odometer. That's less than 700 miles a year since it left the dealership floor. Still affixed to the windshield was a faded 1983 Texas inspection sticker, a ghostly stamp that confirmed the car had been off the road for over 20 years. The car still had its original window sticker, Protecto plate, and the New York license plate from its first owner. These details weren't just paperwork, they were a passport to the past, proving the car's authenticity and elevating it from a dusty relic to a verified survivor. Barn finds often come with a dose of heartbreak, missing parts, rotted interiors, rust-eaten frames. But this Corvette was different. The body was intact. The original paint, though dulled, was still there. The rally wheels were still mounted, albeit on dry-rotted tires. Even the interior, while worn, retained its factory-fitted panels and stitching. It was the kind of condition restorers dream about. It hadn't been cannibalized for parts or bastardized with aftermarket mods. It had simply waited. This wasn't just any 67 Corvette. This was a car that had lived a full life in its early years and then had been parked and preserved in stillness. Some might say it had been neglected, but to a barn find enthusiast like Thomas Weeks, this kind of neglect was a blessing. It meant purity. It meant originality. In the collector car world, originality carries weight, often more than perfection. A car restored to concours condition may sparkle, but a barn find like this, with its untouched soul intact, holds something even rarer: truth. This Corvette hadn't been reborn yet. It was still sleeping. Thomas Weeks, with his seasoned eye, knew exactly what he had. He understood the significance. This was a time capsule from the golden era of American muscle. And it wasn't just valuable in dollars, it was valuable in story, in history, and in character. That's why this Corvette became such a legend even before the engine roared back to life. It reminded everyone that true finds still exist, cars that haven't been flipped, polished, or paraded for Instagram likes. Cars that have simply waited for the right hands to bring them back. The fact that this particular Corvette had survived was a miracle. And it happened not because someone forgot about it, but perhaps because someone loved it too much to let it go. Many barn finds have that bittersweet undercurrent. Sometimes the original owner passes away. Other times, life gets in the way. But the car somehow is spared. And when someone like Thomas Weeks shows up at the right place, at the right time, with the right respect, magic happens. In the realm of classic car discoveries, the moment of the actual uncovering often carries the most weight. It's the tipping point between legend and reality, when a rumor becomes real and a ghost from the past rolls back into the present. The discovery in the barn. For Thomas Weeks, that moment took place near one of the iconic backdrops in Texas pop culture history, South Fork Ranch. But this wasn't a staged television moment. There were no production crews waiting with spotlights, no scripted reactions. This was real. The kind of moment only a seasoned car hunter could appreciate. Quiet, dusty, intimate. It began with a tip. Like many barn finds, the journey to this Corvette didn't start with a big announcement. It started with a whisper. A friend of a friend. A local who remembered some old sports car sitting in a garage for decades. In the world of automotive archaeology, Tips like that are either gold or garbage. But Weeks knew better than to ignore a lead, especially one that placed a potential classic car right near South Fork Ranch, an area known for wealth, history, and people who kept things long past their expiration date. When Weeks arrived at the property, there was nothing immediately extraordinary about the building. It looked like any other outbuilding you might find on a Texas ranch. Weathered siding, dusty windows, the smell of age and heat in the air. But as he opened the door and stepped inside, the outline of something unmistakable greeted him. A long, low silhouette covered in dust, hidden under layers of time. He walked around it, a flashlight cutting through the dimness. The curves, the vented fenders, the unmistakable bulge of a Corvette hood, it all lined up. He was staring at a C2 Stingray convertible, a car that hadn't been touched in decades. And the dust told the story all on its own. Layers of grime coated the body, but beneath it, the paint still clung to the fiberglass like a memory refusing to fade. Cobwebs stretched from wheel, well, to tire. Old tires had sunken flat into the concrete. There was no doubt this car had not moved in years. It hadn't been staged. It hadn't even been cleaned. It was authentically forgotten. What set this barn apart was the completeness of the scene. The Corvette hadn't been stripped. The hood was still latched. The interior, visible through fogged glass, showed cracked but original leather. A yellowed inspection sticker from 1983 still clung to the windshield, barely legible but unmistakable. Thomas Weeks opened the driver's side door slowly, almost reverently. The hinges groaned like a time capsule creaking open. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust, age, and a strange sort of dignity. The gauges were still in place. The steering wheel, though worn, held its classic three-spoke design. This wasn't a wreck. This wasn't a parts car. This was a moment frozen in time. In the glove compartment, he found the original protector plate and dealer documentation, proof this wasn't just a good find. This was the real deal. As Weeks popped the hood, the air thickened with anticipation. And there it was, the 427 cubic inch big block V8 still sitting quietly like a lion at rest. The engine bay was dusty but untouched. This wasn't a hot rod someone had played with. This was as original as barn finds come. In that moment, Thomas Weeks didn't just see dollar signs. He saw a responsibility to bring this car back, not as a reinvented version of itself, but as the machine it once was, the kind that turned heads in 1967, the kind that symbolized power, rebellion, and craftsmanship at its peak. But beyond the technical specs and the rarity, there was something else lingering in the barn. Mystery. Why had the car been stored for so long? Why had no one tried to sell it or restore it? Who was the original owner, and what made them tuck away such a treasure? Sometimes barn finds come with answers, bills of sale, old photographs, handwritten notes. Sometimes they don't. In this case, the car came mostly silent. The documents confirmed it had been bought in New York, later driven to Texas, and then parked. The reasons may never be known, but that silence only added to its appeal. What Thomas Weeks had stumbled upon wasn't just a car. It was a survivor. A machine that had dodged decades of neglect, weather, and even the temptation of being restored too early. It had waited quietly for someone who would see it not just as a project, but as a piece of living history. Once the Corvette Stingray was pulled from its decades-long resting place, Thomas Weeks faced a new kind of challenge, not finding the car, but deciding what to do with it. Restoration of Findings, Corvette Blogger article, 2014. After uncovering the 1967 Corvette Stingray convertible near, Thomas Weeks made a deliberate decision. He would not restore the car. He wouldn't rebuild the engine, replace parts, or give it a full mechanical overhaul. Instead, he chose to preserve it exactly as it had been found, presenting it as a genuine barn find, untouched and authentic. This decision set the car apart from typical restorations. Weeks understood that the real value of this Corvette wasn't in polishing it up or making it road-ready. It was in what had not been touched since the early 1980s. The car still wore its original paint, its factory rally wheels, and an aged interior that bore the marks of time. Even the 1983 Texas inspection sticker remained on the windshield, faded but intact, a timestamp confirming how long it had been off the road. What Thomas Weeks did do was give the car a light surface cleaning. He cleared away the layers of dust and dirt that had built up over decades, just enough to reveal the Stingray's unmistakable lines and curves. But he stopped short of detailing it or replacing any parts. The engine bay was not cleaned, the tires were not changed, and the vehicle was not started. There's no record or evidence, in interviews, videos, or sales listings, that the engine was ever turned over or evaluated for operation. This was not a running car, and Weeks never claimed it to be. Instead, he presented it for what it was: a true survivor, a Corvette frozen in time, likely not started or moved since the early Reagan era. Rather than keep the car or display it, Weeks listed it for sale on eBay, offering the opportunity for a serious collector to own what few vehicles could still claim to be, original and unrestored. The listing included photos of the car in its barn-find condition, as well as supporting documents, including the original Protecto plate, window sticker, and a New York license plate from the original owner. The car quickly gained attention after the Corvette blogger website picked up the story and verified the details. The article highlighted the car's originality, noting that it had not been started, altered, or updated, a key reason it generated such buzz among Corvette enthusiasts and collectors. In an era where over-restoration can strip a car of its historical essence, this Stingray was a reminder of what authenticity really looks like. By choosing preservation over restoration, Weeks protected the Corvette's integrity. Any repairs or revival would be left entirely up to the next owner, giving them full control over how or whether to return it to the road. This approach appealed to purists who value cars not for how shiny they are, but for how truthfully they reflect their age and origin. In a collector world increasingly dominated by modified builds and recreations, Thomas Weeks' Corvette barn find stood out for its restraint. It wasn't a showpiece, it was a piece of history. And in that sense, the car didn't need to run to prove its worth. The attention. After Thomas Weeks brought the Corvette Stingray back to life, word began to spread, not through a flashy TV feature or social media blitz, but organically, the way real legends do. A few images surfaced online, a whisper in car forums. Then the confirmation from a respected source. Corvette blogger published a feature detailing the find. That was when the car community collectively stopped and took notice. Barn finds are nothing new. Every so often, someone unearths a forgotten Camaro or an old Dodge Challenger, and the story does the rounds. But this was different. This wasn't just a rare car. This was a holy grail. A big block 1967 Corvette convertible, mostly original, with under 27,000 miles on the clock and a complete set of documentation? That's not a good find. That's once in a generation. Corvette blogger described the discovery in full detail. They confirmed that it was Thomas Weeks, known from Misfit Garage on the Discovery Channel, who had unearthed the car across from South Fork Ranch. The write-up included photos, glorious photos of the car as it was found, dusty, untouched, and undeniably authentic. It showed the rally wheels, the cracked interior, and the 1983 inspection sticker. But more importantly, it showed a Corvette that looked more like a relic than a restored beauty queen. Weeks had made a decision early on. He wouldn't strip this car of its character. He would clean it, fix it, and get it running, but he wouldn't erase its time capsule charm. That decision elevated the car in the eyes of enthusiasts. It was no longer just a machine, it was a survivor, and in the car world, that distinction matters. As attention grew, so did interest. And finally, Thomas Weeks did what many restorers eventually do. He listed the Corvette on eBay. Not through a dealer or auction house, but through an open platform where the world could watch and bid. This wasn't a secret handshake behind closed doors. It was a public spectacle. The listing caused a ripple in the collector car world. The listing didn't just sell a car, it sold a story. The story of a car hidden for decades. The restorer who honored it. The original documents, the dusty photos, the subtle scars of age, every detail became part of the myth. But Weeks wasn't just selling a Corvette. He was handing over a piece of American history. The winning bidder wasn't just buying a car, they were buying responsibility. Responsibility to maintain what had been preserved, to respect what had been uncovered. In the months that followed, the Corvette story continued to circulate. YouTubers and car bloggers referenced it in barn find roundups. Corvette forums cited it as an example of what a true survivor looks like. And to Thomas Weeks? He went back to doing what he does best, searching, wrenching, and breathing life into the forgotten corners of automotive history. And so the car moved on, but the story stayed. It became one of those tales passed around at car shows and meetups. A car that hid in plain sight for over 3 decades. A restorer who knew what to do with it. And a world that was lucky enough to witness its return. Why cars like this still matter. In today's hyper-documented, ultra-connected world, it's easy to believe that every great car has already been found, bought, restored, and posted on social media. But barn finds like the Corvette Stingray discovered by Thomas Weeks remind us that time still hides treasures, even in the most unassuming places. What made this particular discovery so compelling wasn't just the rarity of the car. It was the condition it was found in, untouched, unrestored, and patiently waiting in the dark for more than 20 years. It had not been picked over, disassembled, or modified. It was whole, silent, complete. And that silence spoke volumes. The car's return to the public eye sparked more than collector interest. It stirred something nostalgic in people. It represented a bridge between generations, between a time when cars were crafted with muscle and style, and a present that sometimes forgets where it all began. This wasn't just a Corvette, it was a capsule of memory, holding within it the fingerprints of its original owner, the decades of dust, and the quiet resilience of survival. The story also served as a reminder that restoration isn't always necessary. There's a growing reverence for preservation-class vehicles, cars left in their original state, showing age, wear, and history. These vehicles aren't just machines, they're artifacts. And the choice Thomas Weeks made to resist the urge to start the engine, repaint the body, or modify the interior elevated this Corvette from a valuable car to a historical piece. That restraint, that respect for originality, is rare. It speaks to an understanding that not every story needs editing. Sometimes, the best way to honor a piece of the past is simply to listen to it, document it, and let it speak for itself. It's worth noting that this car didn't become famous because it broke records or starred in a movie. It became known because it was real. Its imperfections were its proof of life. Its faded sticker, its dry-rotted tires, its quiet engine bay, all of that was evidence of time, and it mattered more than any polish could add. Stories like this also highlight an often overlooked truth in the collector world. Sometimes, the most meaningful vehicles aren't the ones you drive. They're the ones you find, protect, and pass on. This Corvette wasn't flipped for quick cash. It wasn't turned into a restomod. It was offered to someone who could take the next step, whatever that step might be. And that's what makes barn finds so powerful. They're not just about the vehicles, they're about the people who find them, the choices they make, and the respect they show for what they uncover. It's about discovery, about legacy, about slowing down long enough to appreciate the beauty of what time leaves behind. Thomas Weeks' decision to preserve this Corvette as it is, rather than strip away its age, shows a deep respect for the story it carried. He didn't try to rewrite it. He simply revealed it. That kind of honesty resonates not just with car enthusiasts, but with anyone who values authenticity over artificial shine. The legend of the 1967 Corvette barn find isn't about horsepower, speed, or restoration brilliance. It's about preservation, patience, and understanding that sometimes history needs nothing more than to be seen and remembered. Because long after the dust settles and the car changes hands, the story will remain of a car lost to time, and the man who found it listened to it and let it stay exactly as it was.